There was a time I'm digging this trench, we got hit by artillery. It was extremely close. What you do in the situations is that you have to run into the trenches and just pretty much hope for the best.
And just hope for the best.
Yeah. There was a sniper that had come across from the Russian territory into the Ukrainian lines, loaded up with the AK, and we just went out into the woods looking for the sniper.
Men wage war for profit and principle, but fight it for the land, the women and children. How are people sleeping in a place like that?
And at night, they're bombing like everywhere. You keep a person doing watch. The rest of the people just get your blanket and just go to sleep.
This video is brought to you by Wondershare, UniConverter. As a creator working across many platforms to regularly produce content, bro, the process is so long and tedious, and therefore, if you're looking to end this misery of yours, I would like to introduce you to UniConverter by Wondershare. It's a complete video toolbox to convert, compress, edit, burn DVDs, and much more. It's super easy to use, even if you're a pro or even if you're somebody just starting out. UniConverter has everything you need all in one place. It also has multiple AI features to help you easily edit your audios and videos. For instance, two of my favorite features, one of them is the AI background remover, जिसमें आप JPG, PNG, कोई भी और फॉर्मेट लेके without any loss of quality अपने वीडियोस में ग्राफिक्स यूज कर सकते हो. और आपको पता है, मेरे को पता है ग्राफिक्स कितने इंपॉर्टेंट होते हैं यूज करने अपने वीडियोस में. नंबर 2 इज द ऑटो क्रॉप, वेयर फॉर इंस्टेंस मेरे को कंटेंट बनाना होता है यूट्यूब पे. आई हैव टू मेक कंटेंट ऑन इंस्टाग्राम एंड देन आई हैव टू शिप इट इन सो मेनी अदर प्लेसेस. आई हैव टू पुट इट ऑन टिकटॉक, आई हैव टू पुट इट ऑन ट्विटर, आई हैव टू पुट इट ऑन यूट्यूब, आई हैव टू पुट इट ऑन इंस्टाग्राम. ऑटो क्रॉप लेट्स मी कन्वर्ट, क्रॉप all my videos for different platform usage. एक जगह बनाओ, 25 जगह छापो. Best tool, UniConverter by Wondershare. And if you want to save all this time, get a lot of other features, I think you should do one thing which I will tell you right now. Go to the link in the description, press it, access UniConverter and see the variety of tools you can use to make this happen. Go, snap right now.
So let's begin, bro, because I've been meaning to have this conversation and I've waited till we switched on the camera to talk about this. I remember the day you were leaving, or like even a couple of days before, you were here. We were kind of doing a semi-celebration or a semi-farewell, whatever situation. Absolutely. This was back in April?
Yeah, just about
right?
Early April, yeah.
Right. So you flew from the United States to go to Ukraine to fight against the Russians. Is that a fair description? Interrupt me wherever.
I would say to fight with Ukraine.
To fight with Ukraine.
Yeah, as opposed to fight against Russians. I think there's quite a difference in between the wording.
Huh? Why? What is the difference?
I don't think I wasn't going there out of hatred for the Russians. I was going there for the love of what this Ukrainian concept and people represented, which are two completely different aspects of things.
I think it's important for people to know that, and this is why it's strange to me. It's been strange to me for months. I've always spoken about it. There is no relationship you have to Ukraine other than your
No, it's my first time
acquired love for it, right? You were born and raised in?
I was born in California. I was raised in Nicaragua, Central America.
In Nicaragua?
Yeah. Growing up, I was subjected to a semi-communist environment because Nicaragua is very attached to Russia and Cuba and stuff like that. So I'm very much aware of that certain aspect and where that can lead as well. So I get that, in a sense, probably had a flow or at least a subconscious aspect to my decision of going to Ukraine as well.
Because you dislike the communist sentiment in Nicaragua?
I've seen the capacity of where communism can lead a people and how oppressive it can be, and not only seen it but lived through it.
Right.
My uncle from my dad's side, he was killed during the war in Nicaragua, which was like the communists against this imperial government that was implemented prior as well. So yeah, I've seen like different aspects of things.
I think it is also very important for people to know that you've been trained militarily, right? You were in the military or the Navy or like...
In the Marine Corps, yeah.
In the Marine Corps, which means the Navy essentially.
Yeah.
Right. But you were never a fighting soldier during that time. You were never like... No. So this was your first fighting experience?
To the extent that I was in the front lines, yes.
Right. And you chose to do it for a concept, a country, a cause that is somewhat, if not entirely, a stranger to you.
Well, it's difficult to define what strange is. If you're talking about my people as a form of culture, then yes, to that extent, is something separate. But if you're defining the idea of familiarity in association with certain values and systems that I engage in and that I see as extreme virtues, then they might as well be my brothers and sisters.
Very interesting.
Yes.
And so you flew in from New York into Poland, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Because you cannot directly fly into Ukraine
No,
right now.
no.
And then from Poland, are you taking like smuggling routes or are
No,
these
it's a
official
train.
routes? Oh, it's an official, no problem.
Yeah.
So the trains are running as the bombings are happening, bro?
Yes. The train system is operating pretty much at, well, I wouldn't say full effect, but it's mostly operating at nights.
At nights.
At
Because in the
nights,
day,
yeah.
you might get bombed.
You
Huh.
become a more liable target.
And then from Poland, did you land in, what city in Poland did you land in?
Warsaw.
Warsaw. And from Warsaw you went to?
I went to Odessa.
Odessa. Is Odessa one of the, as far as I remember, it's one of the most contested cities in the sense of like the fight happening there?
Well, Russia eventually wants to get to Odessa. If Russia is able to move from Kherson all the way to Odessa, what's going to happen is that it's going to create Ukraine is going to become a landlocked country, or a landlocked nation, which means that it has no water ports whatsoever. It completely surrounds the Black Sea, and that this becomes a huge problem from Ukraine.
From a strategic point.
From a political, from economical, from many different aspects. For Russia, Russia wouldn't see the same benefits that Ukraine sees as a negative, because if Russia is able to take over Odessa and the whole port areas, right, they still wouldn't be able to grow their economical value as it should be.
Right.
So they wouldn't see a benefit there.
Uh-huh.
But they still want it. They still want to take over that whole region. They want to, well, technically, what Russia is doing has many different dynamics to their perspective. I see Russia as doing this as a form of a last stance type of thing. Russia is in a difficult situation, much like China is when we look at demographics, right? The demographics of Russia has been declining drastically, which means less people are having kids. When the Soviet Union fell in the 1990s, there was huge decline in births, right? And there was also a huge exodus of people, which means that a lot of so the way Russia is set up is that the majority of people, Russians, don't have passports, right? A huge percentage of them don't have passports. I believe somewhere between 70 to 80% of individuals.
What?
Yeah. So most of the people that that travel, that go out to different places, they are in the West region. Think of Moscow. Think of St.
Petersburg. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful city, by the way.
I've never been. But I heard
It's gorgeous, bro.
Nice.
Both, even Moscow, it has a very distinct, like the architecture is very Russian. Like similar stuff everywhere. But the
St.
city has
Petersburg, I heard, is just gorgeous.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
It was called Leningrad before, because Lenin, they named it after Lenin. Leningrad.
I thought it was Petrol.
Was it Petrograd?
Something along those lines.
Maybe
they
I'm wrong.
changed it because they thought it was too westernized, but then they went back to the same name.
Very interesting.
But yeah, so they have a issue with their economical development, right? There's a lot of problems in Russia going on. The demographics is declining, the number of people are becoming less and less, and a lot of people are moving out. There's a huge, they call it brain dump, which is like individuals who have a sort of like high education or technical skills are moving out,
Right.
especially now after the war in Ukraine started. So
It's called brain drain.
brain,
Yeah. Because that was a thing when we were young in India too. A lot of conversation around brain drain. Right.
Yeah. So because of that, Russia perceives Ukraine as a great opportunity now to advance, and it's not the first place that it goes to. Like in 2008, I believe, it took over sections of Georgia, right? It took over sections of Georgia. It has it's just trying to sort of expand when it comes to a military perspective or military point of view. Russia is very open. It's extremely open to attacks from different places. The more it can push west, the more defense it has, the more it's able to protect its environment.
How? How does that work?
Because if Russia pushes west, of Ukraine and into Moldova region, right, which already has territory in Moldova. It's protected by the Carpathian Mountains. So that creates a big center of protection. Right now, the region where Ukraine begins and where Ukraine ends and Russia begins is very open.
It's grasslands.
Yes.
Right.
This creates a lot of difficulties. Think of World War II and the Nazis, how they came through Belarus.
Right.
Because it's so flat, so easy.
Right.
So they push west as much as they can. They minimize their field of openness in a way, right? How open they are to an attack.
For sure.
And
That's
same thing when they go south. So they're in the Caucasus region. That's why they want to take over Georgia and all these different regions, right?
Right.
The more they expand in these directions, the narrower their
area of exposure is, essentially.
Absolutely.
So is Odessa, like when you're fighting in Odessa, are you fighting the next city is Russian or is there a buffer of other cities?
So Odessa is not on the front lines. They get hit all the time. Every day there's some bombings going on. There are missile strikes. There's the sirens that go off throughout the day, all the time. You know, there's the idea that there's people, that the Ukrainian people in certain areas are living their regular lives, but that's not the case. I mean, they go to work and they have still an open economy going on, but it's invaded all the time by a sense of fear. There's bombings that happen every day, missile strikes, schools getting hit.
Bro, I'm surprised. Like, isn't Russia supposed to be like the biggest balls in all of that region? How have they not managed to crush Ukraine at this point? Like, no offense, I'm just asking a military question at this point, right?
Yeah, well, that's what everybody perceived. Everybody thought that Ukraine was going to fall within 72 hours.
That's what I thought. I was like, within a couple of months, they're going to be all the way up their necks, and then there's nothing left. Because if look, Germany in World War II was a beast that was defeated partly by the Russians. I mean, they walked in all the way to Moscow and it got cold. And this was not the first time. That's happened several times. People have tried to fuck with Russia. Yeah, with Napoleon, you get to Moscow and it's like, oh, the winter's arrived.
Well, the thing is that Russia has enormous amount of people. Their military is humongous.
So why hasn't that happened? Like, why hasn't the break happened?
Well, the military is not that big anymore. And one of the reasons why they decided to attack now is because, as I said, demographics is dropping.
Right.
The longer it goes, the less people that are going into
the military.
Super
interesting.
There's also attributes that Russians are trying to add more people to Russia, especially people that had left Russia before. There's an issue with trying to incorporate people into the Russian community that are Muslims. Russian has they want to add more people, but their politics are iffy about including a big Muslim population.
Is this Muslim population in Turkmenistan, Dagestan, in that region?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's the Khabib region of things, right? Yeah, because he's very Muslim, right? Like very devotedly so, Khabib.
There's a lot of places that are, Russia also has a Muslim region as well, that is Muslims, Buddhist. There's all sorts of different sections within Russia.
Right. The funny part about reading World War II literature was figuring out that once Russia was fighting the Nazis here, the Chinese and the Japanese started, and you were like, how big is the country to go from Germany to Japan? Like, what the fuck?
It expands tremendously, man.
Wow.
I mean, they had Alaska as well. Russia came all the way down to California at one point.
California?
Yeah.
From the Pacific?
When they crossed over to Alaska, we bought Alaska from the Russians.
Oh, what? The Americans bought it with money?
Yeah.
Damn!
Yeah.
Very shrewd strategic.
It
Why they're so close.
And they had a chance to take sections of California, especially Northern California area.
Where Perry lives.
Yeah.
Perry would have been Russian if not for this one thing, huh?
Well, the Mexican people that lived at the time, they wanted support from Mexico in case something was to happen, because the Americans were pushing west at that time. And the Mexican people were going to give that territory to Russia if Russia recognized Mexico as the the region to dominate that other area, that south port.
And so,
And-
with Russian recognition, they could have fought off the American
Sort of
ascent in the
something
West.
along those lines. At least it
Right.
created a certain sense of protection,
Right.
legal wise. But it didn't happen. Russia didn't want to do it, and they ended up pulling away from California, going back to Alaska. Eventually, we bought Alaska as well. They even went to Hawaii, and there was a lot of issues in Hawaii that happened, and they got kicked out of Hawaii.
But so, okay, you land in Odessa. It's humid. The city is going about its everyday kind of with like an unavoidable sense of fear. So I'm assuming within offices, hospitals, schools, and all the other places that people congregate in, there are bomb shelters where if the siren goes off, you go hide there, right? That's and probably the sirens are going off anywhere between a 20-25 minute frequency to 3-4 hour frequency every day. That's the range I'm assuming, right?
Absolutely.
This is all from YouTube.
3 in the morning, 2 in the morning, doesn't matter the time.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and then there is actual strikes that leave rubble and destruction in its tracks. And you've seen those strikes happening, missiles and bombs landing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in one of the times we're staying with a friend, right? A local, great guy.
Whose friend is that person? Your friend?
Yes.
Okay.
So when we were in Odessa, one of the things that we were doing is that we were teaching military tactics, American military tactics.
And there were a lot of Americans there.
No.
How many?
In our group, we're 4 of us.
So 4 of you are also training the military? You're fighting with the military? No, you're fighting with the rebels.
We're training civilians at first.
Civilians. Very interesting.
Also, military groups.
Okay.
Being the territorial defense, being the actual military, the army, different individuals.
Okay.
One of the times we went over with the territorial defense, we're by Kherson, which a lot of the fighting is going on right now. So we were like close to the front lines. We were there for probably like about a week or so. We come back to Odessa, right? Because we usually go to different places, and then we always end up going back to Odessa in a certain way.
Right.
So we go back, and my friend, like the local over there, right? He picked us up. He takes us to his place, and we stay at his place for one night until we get like a hotel or something. But so we're just standing there, right? Like we're done with what we were doing. We stunk. We smell so bad. The smell of war it's a real smell, and it stinks.
What is it? Burnt ceramic smell?
It's the smell of body fluid, the smell of ammunition, the smell of dirt and sweat and blood, and it stinks.
And it's surrounding constantly the city of Odessa or wherever you are.
No, it's in Odessa. It's more or less an open economy, and things are running pretty smoothly for the most part.
Okay.
This was when we were in close to Kherson.
Kherson.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, did you experience in Odessa like the building next door just go boom?
Well, when we got back from Kherson, right? Our friend picked us up. We're at his place. He lives in Odessa, the outskirts, right? Like a little bit away from the main city center. We're still like right there in the city. So we're at this nice building. We're like probably like on the 20-something floor, or maybe 14th floor, and we're outside. So my friends, they're smoking, and we just see a missile coming from the sea. We just see a missile coming, and it gets intersected by Ukrainian
Missile defense.
Missile defense, yeah. So it gets blown up in the air, but it was coming right in our direction.
And when that happens, I'm assuming the rubble and like, so like if missiles collide, I'm sure the metal parts will fall down and have impact too. That's so intense, bro.
Yeah.
Because like, can you always count on missile defense systems like that?
No. I mean, you see them a lot. You see them like throughout the day. You see the missiles coming in, the Russian missiles, and then you see them blow up in the air.
And the way the missiles are intercepted are with other missiles, right? Because that's how the Iron Dome works in Israel. They have 16 smaller missiles that go.
Israel is fascinating. Their technology, the military technology is
they're number one in military technology at this point.
And a lot of it came from a necessity.
Right.
There's an aspect. There's a fascinating thing, which it sucks, but at the same time, it's very true. You know, the idea that Nietzsche says, that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger, right?
Also, Taylor Swift said that. Katy Perry.
There you
Sorry,
go.
my bad, dude.
Dude,
Yes.
but it holds true not only to the individual, but to a nation. in the military, there's this aspect that says that a nation is built in war, and there's so many concepts that are true to that statement. There's think of the American Revolution and how it defined what it is to be an American.
Right.
For Ukraine, I honestly foresee, not just because I'm fighting with Ukrainians and doing this stuff, I don't foresee Ukraine losing this war.
You don't think so?
I don't think so, and I think Ukraine is actually going to come in a lot stronger than it ever was before. Because Ukraine, there's corruption in Ukraine. Ukraine is there's a lot of issues there as well. And I've seen it when I was there.
So you're living in comfortable situations then in Odessa. Like you're living with people in their apartments, 14th floor. Sounds kind of luxurious. Or are you like bunking in spots and like that?
No. In Odessa, is mostly based on teaching individuals and talking to different groups, trying to see where we're going to be heading off to next.
Okay.
Right.
And what is the decision-making process of where are we heading off to next?
It's talking to different militaries. So, for example, one of the groups that we went with was the 28th Brigade. 28th Brigade is a mobilized brigade unit of the army of Odessa that got mobilized to Mykolaiv, which is where a lot of the fighting's happening, right? Mykolaiv was supposed to be taken over by the Russians. They got pushed back. Now they keep getting pushed back farther and farther east. But when I was there, we went over to work with them as well.
I know. I mean, so okay, suppose Phil is that military. I talked to Phil. Phil's like, you should go to this city. But why? Because the war's raging there and we need you, or like, what is the cause behind you doing that?
Yes, that plays a role. The looking to go into the front lines.
Okay.
So that was.
Were you involved in combat then?
Yes, we were in the front lines, but we were mostly in by Izium area, by the Donbass region.
By the Donbass?
Yeah.
It's literally called a Donbass region?
That's the area. So that's far east. Far.
How
east.
do you spell Donbass? DUMBASSASS?
Something on those lines.
Oh, there's a proper area in the world called the Donbass.
DU.
DU, yeah.
Yeah.
So, when you were involved in combat, are you like shooting? Like, what are you doing?
No, so the war itself is not this glorious notion that we tend to perceive when it comes to battle, where you have your rifle and your bayonet and you go head first, right? Like in the 1700s. It's not the case at all. But the way this war is set up, especially the more we move into it, especially nowadays, is mostly in artillery warfare.
Right.
Which it plays at Russia's strength.
Because they're very heavy on artillery.
Because they're heavy on artillery and they got a lot of ammunition.
Artillery is the long distance missiles and bomb firing situations, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Because I also don't think there has been a proper war of this magnitude. Like, look, Iraq, I think, was an invasion. Like, I don't think the Iraqis were ready to defend them at all in any capacity, neither militaristically nor politically. They were already sort of a crumbling nation when UK and the US went in, and it was not the smoothest, but it was smooth enough, right?
Well, the way we went into in the 90s, right? The Gulf War, the way we went in there, not saying it was right or wrong, but just from a military perspective, was a huge triumph. The idea that we went in there before the first thing we did, which is what Russia didn't do in Ukraine, was the first thing we did is we rained hell with missiles in heavy attacks through planes, right?
Right.
Through the air. So we bombed a bunch of different places. We flying out a lot of military sections. And then it was probably like a couple days or a week of just complete bombing these areas. And then we went in on foot, right?
Right.
Which was, from a military perspective, was extremely influential in the attacks that proceeded after that.
I mean, maybe
Russia didn't do that.
No, but maybe in Afghanistan there was a little bit of like a proper warfare aspect when the Russians were still active and the Americans and the Russians were kind of facing off, But like the last memory I can recall, and I might be extremely unaware, of a proper combat was maybe the Vietnam War, where it's a guerrilla warfare, you're fight, but you have the guns in your hands, you're in the dirt, you're like shooting, the kind of shit you see in Hollywood, right? The kind of shit that's mythologized about as far as war is concerned. Like nobody has mythologies, some, but about bombing from the air. Bombing from the air is a brilliant military technique, but it's not what stories are made out of, right? Am I wrong?
As far as, I guess, romanticizing war, is
Yes,
that what
yes.
you mean?
Right, yeah. Like in a romantic view of the war, what really gets popularized is the hand-to-hand combat where you're near about in the trenches, like looking over, slowly firing. And here's the thing, the whatever war situations we see in India are along the India-Pakistan border. Sometimes now near the Chinese border too. And those are land borders up in the Himalayas, high up in the... So there you're doing trench fights. There you're shooting from the top of mountains.
Where there's a section where you can't even use weapons, it's hand to hand, right?
In the in the middle, right?
Yeah.
You could actually, like, there was this one video that got very famous of Indian soldiers punching the fuck out of Chinese soldiers because, like, just beating the shit out of them for crossing. Yeah. They were like, "What the fuck?" And he was going, "Yeah, those motherfuckers, bro." And there's a unit of Tibetan soldiers that fled. This is Tibetan regiment that fled when China conquered Tibet and so on and so forth. Huge ass dudes. Like generally, the Chinese people are smaller people in size, average size wise. Those guys are huge, like 6'4", 6'5", bulky as hell, willing to punch down a stranger if they see them, right? And so we see a lot of that back in India. This does not sound like this was urban warfare between skyscrapers, like shooting with your rifles. This is more artillery based, just bouncing off artillery.
Most of it, that's the way it is. With small guerrilla warfare attacks,
sometimes,
coming from... a lot of times coming from Ukrainians, So the way we tend to act is send small groups of individuals, go through fields, vegetations, whatever you can. You attack, you retreat.
Okay.
And then you do that again.
Were you involved in any of that?
No, it was mostly trenches.
Trenches.
Yeah, or just being in a post lookout spot type situations.
Very interesting. Were you scared at all, bro?
Well, there was a time so we're in the trenches. I'm digging this trench. That's a lot of what you do over there. We got hit by artillery. It was extremely close, right?
How close are we talking?
Well, I was. It was a little closer to one of my friends. He was, I don't know.
Did he lose limbs?
Maybe no. He was probably like 100 meters or so.
Oh, okay. Okay, so still far enough to avoid
probably like 50 meters. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was very, very close. Well, that was the first hit. Then eventually get it closer and closer. The way they do it is when you do with artillery, the way they have it set up is they start shooting or you start shooting and you shoot. Maybe you're 200 meters away, then you keep shooting. You might be the next one 100 meters, then 150, then 75. So you get
so they're covering the range together, right?
Yeah,
they're converging in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you do in those situations is that you have to run into the trenches and just pretty much hope for the best.
And just hope for the best.
Yeah. There's not much else you can do.
And all you can do is hope for. There's no run or normal human reactions to danger. You just hope for the best.
Go through the trenches, And then after that, so after we got attacked with artillery, it was we got a call from the radios that there was a sniper that had come across from the Russian territory into the Ukrainian lines. So it was me and somebody else, my team captain. Then we loaded up with the AK and a machine gun and a bunch of rounds, and we just went out into the woods looking for the sniper.
Isn't that like a bad move? Because the sniper can pretty much shoot you from a very long distance.
Yes, it's. I mean, we're trying to go through the woods. We're trying to
keep the cover and so on.
Yeah.
How aware are you in that moment? Like, are you always looking around as you're walking through this shit?
Well, you're looking more forward because you know the direction of the individual and you know about the distance. So you try to keep.
Did you find them?
No.
Okay.
You ended up getting a call. They retreated back to the Russian situation. But throughout that time, we have no idea where he can be. So we're extremely alert, like hyper alert of anything going on.
How are people sleeping in a place like that? Not well? I'm assuming because you're constantly amygdala firing.
No. It becomes you fall asleep.
Oh, okay.
You sleep, yeah. There was times we were by Kherson area. we're in this security post, right? We're like, there's this the military group, a small military base, and we're a little bit closer to where the Russians are. We're like the first post. So we're between our military or the Ukrainian military and the Russians, and we're the first position, right? And at night, you know, the Russians were doing a lot of artillery attacks, right? And they're bombing like everywhere, and we're in this little house, and you know, we keep a person doing watch, but the rest of the people are just sleeping. You know, you just get your blanket and just go to sleep.
Now I want to ask, bro, honestly, is your purpose, whatever it was, in doing this adventure, do you feel fulfilled in that?
I feel like I got more than I thought
You would
over
get.
there.
And is there a sense of transformation that's come from it?
Absolutely.
What is that?
Huge.
That's what I'm curious about.
Huge.
One sec. Because let me give people a little bit of history on Brian as well, right? Like, hands down, people heard Perry on the podcast. Perry's a tough fucking guy. One of the toughest people I know. But if I were to go up that hierarchy and go up 20 more steps and then look around and go up 10 more steps, that's where Brian begins with his feet. And then there is 8 more steps where Brian's way higher up the toughness hierarchy. And he does shit with so much intention. We'll come to the grandiose water fast in a second and a half that Ash was discussing with Brian before. But there is always this sense of sharpening the sword with you. Not just with what you read, not just with your homeworks, which is so casual if you just mention it like that. Not just with the way you eat and the way you train, but even this life-endangering adventure you went on. I'm convinced there is a sense of sharpening the sword for you. You're always, in a sense, preparing for some kind of a battle. It might not be a physical battle, it might be a spiritual battle, psychological, emotional, but you are always in preparation. The military mindset, I don't know if it was before you joined the Corps as well, but you have that alive and centered in you. I've always noted that. So, in view of that, what angles of the sword was sharpened? What was the preparation for and such?
Well, I think, I've been studying philosophy for quite some time, even before I went to Colombia, right? I've been fascinated with philosophy, with theology, with history, with all these different aspects. I got to a point, well, even I guess before that, I've always tried to test my philosophies with life experiences. I'm very stoic in many ways. So ideas of like memento mori, right? Being mindful of death. This concept is associated with
Marcus Aurelius.
being aware with death to the level that you get to live right now, right? And all these different concepts. But you can only philosophize for so long sitting on the couch. You can only hypothesize these ideas. They don't become true. They don't become a part of you. We don't develop our ideas. Ideas develop us. And the way to put them into action is when we personify these things, when we actually integrate it into our being.
Right.
And by going to Ukraine and by fighting over there was so many different aspects. I think personally, I don't believe in the concept of free will, right? I don't believe to an extent, the idea, at least for me, the idea that I am doing something for the sake of doing it. I think ultimately there's a sub-level to every action that anybody does, and that level underneath is masqueraded by a sense of intentions, but the actual intentions is not really there.
We've had a logjam on this particular issue about whether intention rests or not, like a few months ago. Whether there is actual intention, how can you prove it, what does it mean, and so on. So
but for the sake of argument, right, we'll say that I was gonna go there regardless. It wasn't my choice.
Yes, that's what I remember you saying before you were going when I questioned you. You were like, I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't have a choice. This idea took over me and I moved. You can call it the Holy Spirit if you want, right? You can call it the process of evolution.
The Tao.
Yeah, the Tao,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The flow, leaning into your instinct, so on and so forth, right?
Absolutely. So I moved forward in this aspect. Once I was going there, I was fascinated by a Austrian philosopher. His name is Ludwig Wittgenstein.
Wittgenstein.
Yeah,
Yep.
he wrote a book, right?
Tractatus?
Absolutely. He wrote that book when he was, surprisingly enough, he was in World War One fighting the Russians.
And he was in the trenches.
He was in the trenches,
writing Tractatus.
And
Yeah.
well, the second half of the book, he was in the trenches. The first half, he was still in school. So he wrote the first half while he was in school, and it's more of a well articulated, almost scientific, logical perspective to it. And then the second half becomes more abstract, right? And this creates the book to become a very interesting, intriguing, and complicated text.
Right. It's his magnum opus, right?
Yes,
That's how it's
yes.
known. And isn't this the book where he's talking about language games and
Yes.
such? Yep. Okay.
Yes, the issue with our understanding is the limit of language.
Right.
So he wouldn't have gotten that perspective if he hadn't been in war. And I felt like going over there, I was going to get a new perspective. Something was going to change in me.
And what did?
And it did. I guess once I was there, it wasn't much about what I was going to get out of it. And it became a universal concept of implementing everybody else around me. And it was a sense of love that derived from that.
A sense of love
A sense of love.
from war.
Yes.
There is something very interesting I read once in a book called Shantaram. I've mentioned this book several times in my content. It's about an Australian heroin addict, bank robber who ends up in Mumbai. And then his story from there and how he lives and such. And eventually he ends up in Afghanistan fighting against the Russians, right? And again, the Russians, wow. And so there is a moment where he's talking about war and he says, men wage war for profit and principle, but fight it for the land, the women and children. But he says the land and the women. Because when a man's dying, he does not look at his principle, he does not look at the profit. He gathers the piece of, like, he gets together whatever sand he can manage in his fist, in his dying fist, and then lets it roll off, or thinks about the woman he's loved, his mom, his sister, his wife, his whatever. And that becomes the foundation. And he's talking about how the sentiment of war is in fact encouraged, or rather is somehow related to the sentiment of love. And the funny part is you can verify that biologically. Like if you put in some oxytocin up, say, Brian's nose, and you begin to hurt his younger brother or his nephew, there is going to be no love response. Oxytocin is supposed to be the bonding hormone for Brian's going to get mad. And that's what you see in female dogs that have just given birth. You go near their pups and they get mad from oxytocin. So there is a sense in which love and protection, and the extension of protection being war, they're sort of related. They're sort of like two halves of the same coin. So tell me about, actually I want to know, I've done 3-day fasts. Frankly, the second day is the worst. 3-day, this is water fasting, so you're drinking water and having a little bit of salt to maintain electrolyte levels, but mostly you're without food. Mostly you're completely without food. Day 2 is the worst. You feel the weakest. The headache's heavy, at least back when I was doing it. Day 3 onwards, I felt quite settled in my no food territory. Like I even remember accidentally making a 4th day one time, because after day 3, I was fasting because I was having a bad allergic breakout. And I could not understand why. This was beginning of COVID. So I fasted for 3 days. Day 3, bro, the allergy went away.
It's magnificent, man.
It's magnificent.
Actually, the early Indians, man, one of the first things that they have for medicine was to fast for 7 days. If you were in bed, this was in, when was it? Like 500 BC. The doctors would recommend for you to fast for 7 days before any treatment could be applied. So, and huge amount of people got better during that time.
So, but then here's what happened. Okay, day 3, I begin to see that the thing is going away in the morning. At night, I go and fetch myself food, and by the time I'm home again, the allergies popped up. So I'm like, shit, I gotta go one more day. And I ended up doing 96. And the last 24 hours did not even feel like shit, because I was already in the zone. I was committed to getting rid of this allergy. This allergy was very physical in the sense it was all on my face and shit, very ugly. I didn't want it on me. So there was also that motivation adding to that, right? But day 3 and day 4 were easier than day 2 and day 1. Day 2 is the worst, day 1's kind of bad. But you also come out with a complete rejuvenated sense of being. Absolutely. When you finally eat food again, Just the gratitude of putting something on your tongue is insane, right? But 7 days is motherfucking crazy, bro. The fuck you doing fasting for 7 days on water? Why are you doing it? And why are you going so heavy on the weights when you're doing this? Because I see your Instagram stories and you're deadlifting as much. You were pulling up with weights, tying your back down.
I actually went higher in weight.
You went higher in weight.
I lifted more during the fast than before the fast. And then after I finished the fast, I went back and my I guess the level dropped. So I went.
Damn, so you were performing better while you were fasting.
Yes, there's a very psychological aspect to it.
Why? What is the science? Give me like a brief breakdown of the science.
Well, there is a higher level of growth hormones that are being drastically increased when you're fasting exponentially. By day 3, you're producing just an enormous amount of
human growth hormone.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, which is great for your body.
Yes. It rejuvenates you. It increases muscle mass, strength. There's
Right.
This is the fountain of youth in many ways.
The fountain of youth. This is also what a lot of like the extremely rugged muscle junkies use to grow their muscles too, is HGH, right?
That yeah.
But that's synthetic.
Stuff, yeah.
But that's synthetic.
Yeah, this is something the pituitary gland is actually producing.
It's actually producing.
And it's not just that. I think one of the biggest factors of why I improved so much during the fast is because I have a bunch of injuries. I've had like a motorcycle accident. I've had a bunch of injuries in the military. My shoulders are messed up, my hip, my knee. So I had issues with my right shoulder after coming back from Ukraine. I used to carry like a bunch of like heavy equipment on this shoulder, and you kind of like messed it up.
Right.
During the fast, the inflammation goes down drastically. So your level of inflammation drops almost to zero, and that helped. Plus, decreasing the inflammation in my body, in my joints, plus adding this fountain of youth hormone, right? This growth hormone actually healed my shoulder a lot. So I was able to improve on my weight. And then once I ate, the inflammation kind of like started coming back a little, and I can see a decrease in that aspect.
Isn't there also that process of like dead cells being like digested out of the body, or like
Like
it's a cancer killing
autophagy, yeah.
Autophagy. Yes, it's an autophagous state where like the more active cells are eating up and destroying the dead cells that might have led to a bunch of inflammatory situations.
Yes. So your body's constantly, pretty much killing itself and rebuilding itself, right, by cells.
Right. How long can you go? And I don't mean just you, but I mean generally. Like, if this is the state I should be in, why am I eating at all?
Well, I don't think starvation is or fasting is a state that you should be at all times. It's something that there's this concept called hormesis. It's the idea.
Hormesis?
Yes.
How do you spell it? Hermesis?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, but either way. So hormesis is the step of, is the idea of what Nietzsche says, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Right.
It happens in the cellular level as well. There's this improvement that goes on by stresses. And these particular stresses that we put in our body, kind of like heat, like sauna or like cold plunges. These are aspects of thermal hormesis as well. And these have big benefits on the body. It releases a bunch of different hormones and a bunch of benefits that come from it. But if you prolong it for too long, then it can become problematic. But there's one case, and this is a medical study. It was a guy, I believe he was maybe in the 1940s or something along those lines. He went, I believe, like almost a year, like 287 days or something like that without eating. Under medical supervision, he was taking vitamins and stuff like that.
There is a lot of political prisoners during the independence struggle of India that went hundreds of days without food as acts of protest and did not die. And I mean, around that time, because the situation's so military, political, so on and so forth, also during World War, nobody's like willing to talk about it. But if you look back, I'm assuming they went into a state of ketosis and autophagy, and the fasting took over, because that's many weeks of not eating, you know? And but that is so interesting.
Well, Ashoka, he went when he was supposedly, because nobody really knows when he died, but when there's a story that goes that when he died, he went on without eating. He gave so he was very big into Buddhism, right? He was giving a lot of stuff to Buddhism. Eventually, the Brahmins at the time kind of like hated that aspect of things, and this is just a story. It's this mythology, which is fascinating. I think mythologies are very important. But there's this idea that when he was closer to the end of his life, he was giving most of his stuff away, and his I believe it was his son. They were taking stuff away from him already. They were implementing themselves in power and pushing Ashoka out of power. And eventually, the only thing he had left was a bowl of rice or something along those lines, and he gave that out to a Buddhist monk, right? And then after that, he didn't eat anymore. He didn't have anything else, and he kind of just
slowly
that
died,
way.
which is ironical because that's the Jain way. As far as I'm aware
Yeah.
of Jain mythology,
Yeah,
the way you
they do that a lot. And
pass in life is
Yeah.
you just stop eating and slowly just starve yourself to death, which is
Yeah.
right. But
So to that extent, I wouldn't say it's necessarily good, but there's an area where it's actually very beneficial, and especially for people in the United States. We have plenty of food. We probably eat too much.
Oh,
we
bro.
many don't know what hunger is. We think we're hungry.
It makes no sense to me that this is a country where the relevant food problem is not starvation, which is the rest of the world, it's obesity. Here, the cheapest food that's accessible is not like grains, it's McDonald's. And that is saying a lot about how capitalism's inverted the food paradigm forever in this country, right? Like, as much as I'm anti-communist in my ways of thinking, I'm very aware of the ways in which capitalism kind of sucks. And McDonald's is a huge aspect of that. The fact that you can get cheaper Coke in this country than water is a testament to how bad things can get if you let money-making enterprises have like no sense of morality associated with them, right? But
Absolutely, man. There's a big problem when it comes to just from the concept of like the idea. So right now we're getting closer to going to a huge world famine, right? There's this estimate that over 1 billion people are going to be dying within this next couple of years.
no way.
It's already starting. September is supposed to start hitting. The war in Ukraine, Russia attacked on Ukraine is an aspect that's more profound than people realize.
Huh.
Here in the United States produces pretty much everything in house. We are pretty much sealed from world economical collapses,
Right.
to a large extent. So we are in a position of
Relative safety.
relative safety, absolutely. But worldwide, India has gonna see a lot of difficulties coming on in certain areas. Places like there's so many different regions that are.
I wouldn't be surprised, bro. Like, I think as far as the ecological crisis go, we speak a lot about rising water levels and climate change and so on, maritime situations. But what we really don't speak about is how much irrigation, how much agriculture is going to be impacted, and what that is going to do to the polity of so many of these countries. Like the northern part of India, some of the most fertile lands in the world after the Nile and those regions,
Absolutely.
Amazon.
Yeah.
The water levels, the water table is so incredibly low at this point that, and it's all contaminated by insecticide and pesticide heavy usage in the 60s and the 70s with the Green Revolution. So there is a lot of that goes under the radar we don't talk about quite often. And like what at least COVID did is wake us up to the fact that there are unknown unknowns that might completely change your life without you ever realizing that they've casually slipped under the door for you, right? And I also am a pessimist when it comes to things being the way they were. Like, I'm not nostalgic. I'm not nostalgic because I don't think beyond this the world will go back to what it was pre-2020. It just will not.
Oh no, the world has changed
Forever.
drastically. The when it comes to world politics and geopolitics and economics, the U.S. is reducing its influences in other parts of the world. We have right now we're at the lowest point when it comes to
Military influence?
military influence around the world. We keep coming back and coming back. Right now, our biggest in the United States, our biggest, I guess the people that we import and export with, right, is our neighbors.
Mexico and
Mexico
Canada.
is huge. Mexico by itself, if the United States and Mexico are 1-1, they can survive. They can withstand a world economical collapse in pretty good conditions. So the United States is pulling away from a lot of these regions. The idea of post World War II Soviet times have drastically changed for the United States, and our geopolitics are changing as well. And with this happening right now in Ukraine has expedited the process even more. There are places that are going to be suffering because of it. I think places like Germany is a very difficult situation. But there's countries that are going to come up and evolve from this. I think Turkey is a very good position. Japan, all these different places are implementing themselves pretty well. India, surprisingly, so when the whole change of globalization happened and all these different economies open up to the world, right? And they saw drastic improvements in their GDP, right? India didn't necessarily play ball. India didn't globalize the same way that different nations did, and I think to that extent, India kind of like stagnated somewhat in their economical development.
What time frame are we talking about?
After World War II.
Oh, after World War II.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So
India followed the Soviet model.
To an extent, India, I think, has implemented both. India has had close relationships with both the United States and Russia.
So up until the 90s, India and Russia were best friends, right? And it was so weird because a lot of the spy insurgencies in India in the early years of its independence came from KGB. The CIA was lost. They could not do left from right in India because the KGB was so well positioned back then. But when in the 90s the Soviets fell, India realized that not only did the model not work, two, they have nobody to support them financially, and we have no forex reserves. And that's when we went down the American path of globalization and liberalization in 91. That's when most of the economic boom happens, and most people who are rich today in India became rich during that period. Post 91, early 2000s, early 2010s. Even now, it has a steady incline in terms of growth, but it's not going as fast as it should have probably.
Yeah, but when it comes to imports and exports, it's still very, very low. It's not a globalized nation by any means.
No, mostly imports.
Others. But it's a good thing because if
shit hits the fan.
If we move away from globalization, which is happening already, India, it's in a good position.
It's well positioned
for economical development.
And I think there was some foresight related to that because like about 3 or 4 years ago, the government launched a self-sustenance campaign where make in India, produce in India. I think the anticipation is quite accurate from whatever little I know of this stuff. There is a move towards localization, which is the antithesis of globalization, where you must be self-sufficient within your borders because things are not stable. We were living a dream. The dream we almost woke up from somewhere in 2008 when the financial crisis hit. The dream of unattended markets, uncontrolled market economies. The fact that would survive the world and we would become a global village. Do you remember that terminology? It was fed to us when we were young in schools, global village. There is no global village. That's an oxymoron in its construction. Yeah. It just cannot be. You need an outgroup. It just cannot be that way. The only way for this to become a global village is if you see alien spaceships hovering over us and we're suddenly like, where is China? Where is Russia? Let's get together. Let's go to war. Up until then, you're not a global village. You're just empires that have begun to fight not militaristically, but technologically and economically. Those are buffers to war, right? First, you sanction economic warfare. Then you hack technological warfare. And then you invade militaristic warfare. That's what we've come to. We've come to fighting online. And America, that's why, all the civil war in America is no longer going to be fought on land. It's going to be fought on Twitter. And it already is to a great degree, right? And so I think it's just that the means of operations have changed so quickly over the last 30, 40 years. We haven't really calibrated with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I would say that the imperial model has already been destroyed pretty much. Well, to a large extent, I wouldn't say it's been destroyed, but to a large extent, having post-World War II, the actual imperial model was drastically changed by the ability of having open markets. That changed the whole perspective of how we do business and how we do stuff. and the idea of going in and conquering countries. We thought it was, almost over in many ways. I mean, it's proven wrong by
Right.
the actions that are happening right now, but nonetheless, it's we're moving farther and farther away from that. And,
Right.
and that was the notion of the new world order that occurred, and I think something else is taking its place now.
I see that. What would you leave this conversation with? Is there something that you want to say? Something that's left?
I think we covered
Yeah.
everything pretty well.
We covered most of the ground, Ash. Do you think we've done a good job?
Yep.
Yeah? You had fun? Man, thank you so much for doing this, Brian.
Absolutely.
Hopefully you do one more adventure soon and we can sit down and talk about stuff. I had so much other stuff to cover, but I underestimated how damn fascinated I am with your decision to go to Ukraine and spend a complete hour talking about it. I could have man, fucking fantastic. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're this tough, and I'm so glad more people than me can be inspired by you at this point.